Scott Ritter, one-time Marine intelligence officer who served as the former Soviet Union in the former Soviet Union, implementing arms control agreements. And from 91 to 98, he served as chief inspector for the United Nations in Iraq, leading the search for Iraq's prescribed weapons of mass destruction. He was later a vocal critic of the American decision to go to war with Iraq. He is also the author of 9 books, including his latest, Disarmament in the Time of Perestroika, Arms Control, and the End of the Soviet Union. Welcome to the show, Scott. How are you? Good to see you.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Also with us is Jose Vega, is the Bronx-based activist who previously worked as a staffer for Dianne Sayre, who ran as an independent U.S. Senate against New York Chuck Schumer. Jose is he's famous for confronting all the politicians and the bad people about their support for the Ukraine war and the Gaza war and all that kind of stuff. He is currently a candidate for the U.S. House in New York's 15th congressional district against incumbent Richie Torres. Hey, Jose, how are you?
Hanging in there. Happy to be here.
So I don't know if both of you saw this. I wanted to show it to you. MSNBC deleted this interview about Palestine. It was with Jeremy Scahill, who got, it's nice to see he got approval from his billionaire handlers to tell the truth about a war. So that's always good to see. I'm happy about that. So let's watch this and watch what happens.
I've just gotten done seeing images from the ground where children are being shredded like meat in a butcher shop. I don't understand how any of us, whether we're journalists or not, this isn't about objectivity, how any of us can watch this genocide unfold in real time and watch the pontificating of the politicians running for president and not just cry out, this has to stop. I mean, this has to stop. We've looked at this. I mean, I know you've reported on the ground from Gaza. I mean, we're watching a genocide in real time. And I'm sorry, but on this network also, there are people who have promoted propaganda from Israel. There are people cheerleading for those running for office who are lying to the American people about concern for the Palestinians. And yes, we should talk about Yahya Sinwar. But Yahya Sinwar is also in many ways the story of Gaza. Yes, this was a violent man, but his violence was rooted in the fact that he was born in a refugee camp. And Israel, throughout his entire life, waged a war of annihilation against the Palestinians. I'm not here to defend Yahya Sinwar. I'm here to say that we can't talk about who Yahya Sinwar was or what Hamas is without talking about 76 years of colonialism, of apartheid, of mass killing, of mowing the lawn, of controlling the calories. Yahya Sinwar's death, the White House is saying this provides a moment to sort of pivot and to make a settlement. And what does Netanyahu do in response to those speeches from Kamala Harris and Joe Biden and John Kirby? He doubles down. Yeah. He goes full force, final solution on the people of northern Gaza. Yes, let's talk about Yahya Sinwar, but my God, we cannot watch more children being shredded and say that this is okay.
Well,
this is just a political issue. No.
So that actually ended up getting deleted. So here it is. This is why MSNBC doesn't want you to watch Jeremy Scahill's interview. The episode on MSNBC's weekend show was aired and later posted on the channel's social media accounts. However, only a day later, the interview was deleted from the channel's online platform, sparking concerns about censoring of voices that are critical of Israeli war in Gaza. In the interview, Scahill says Israel has been waging an extermination campaign in the north of Gaza for the past 2 weeks. There is no food or medicine of any kind that can reach the north. And first of all, let me just say, and I'm sure when that got deleted, I imagine it was a decision to remove the post was handed down in measured tones, followed by a contemplative trip to a unisex restroom. That's all. It's my guess. In stark contrast with Republicans, however, Democrats have been sending in hand sanitizer. The State Department has personally oversaw an airdrop of lawn signs reading "Joy." So that's good to hear. So there's no food or medicine going in at all, but that's just going to go to the enemy. Am I right? Come on. Here we go. Their enemy is the worst kind of enemy. Children who are unarmed. Israeli forces began the relentless attacks in the north of Gaza about 3 weeks ago, with the declared aim of preventing Hamas fighters from regrouping, and continued to intensify after the killing of Hamas chief Yahya Sinwar last Wednesday. The health ministry has said over 650 people have been killed since the new attacks began, with at least 16 people killed on Wednesday as Israeli forces targeted a hospital, refugee shelters, and ordered residents to head south. The former investigative reporter for The Intercept also spoke about how MSNBC promoted propaganda from Israel, calling the channel out for its reporting on the Israeli war in Gaza. We can't just sit here as journalists or normal people or whatever your job is and watch human beings shredded and say it's self-defense. Nothing is self-defense about this. So I think the best way to help Hamas not regroup is to deny them baby formula. Anyway, let me bring in Jose Vega, famed anti-war activist, along with Scott Ritter. First of all, what do you have to say about them taking down that video?
Well, I think I'll start here and then I'll pass it off to Scott. I mean, the fact that a voice like that's just speaking reason. It's not even a condemnation of one side or another. It's not saying that Hamas was right or wrong. It's not saying that Israel was right or wrong. Well, it is saying Israel's wrong. But the point is that the killing needs to stop. That's it, right? It's not saying that we should celebrate what happened on October 7th or anything like that. It was the most reasonable thing you could say on mainstream media. It was very, just like common sense. The killing should stop, and the killing is not stopping. It's horrible. And the fact that they would delete that, who the hell would disagree that killing should stop and that we should stop sending baby formula and food to Gaza? Nobody would disagree with you on that. And the fact that the mainstream media would delete just that, like, hey, maybe we should stop this, I think goes to show how depraved our mainstream media has become, and the fact that we can't rely on it anymore for reason and rational thought. But I'm sure Scott's got more to say.
Take it away, Scott.
Well, I'm going to probably say things that might be a little controversial, but hey, Jeremy Scahill, go to hell, dude. Don't soft pedal Sinwar. Don't sit there and say, let's talk about Sinwar. Let's talk about Hamas. Piers Morgan infamously starts off each one of his interviews on this subject of, will you condemn Hamas? And the answer must be, hell no. How can you condemn Hamas when the enemy they're fighting is this genocidal Zionist regime in Israel that is literally committing mass murder in our very eyes? This is like condemning Sam Adams. This is like condemning George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, for having the gall to stand up to British tyranny. Sinwar is a hero. And if you don't recognize that, then you're the problem, not the solution. Israel is a nation that has lost the right to exist. It is a apartheid state. That's not me saying this. This is the International Court of Justice, the supreme body of the international community, mandated by the United Nations. It calls it a genocidal state, actively committing genocide. We know this is happening, and yet we're going to get into a debate about niceties about Sinwar and Hamas. Hamas is an organization born in refugee camps, but Jose, it's not a refugee camp. It's an open air prison. It's a concentration camp. He is the child of parents who were forcefully evicted from their homes by the Israelis in 1948. And he said, along with others, that I will not condemn the future generations of Palestinians to suffer thus. Therefore, we will go to war against the enemy, and the enemy is Israel. Why we don't acknowledge this and say it right up front. Hamas is at war with the enemy, and the enemy is Israel. You can be on Israel's side, or you can be on Hamas's side, but Jeremy, you can't have it both ways, pal. That's my take.
That sounds like, people like to say that Israel has a right to defend itself. And would you agree with the comparison that I have made, that that's like saying that, the United States has a right to defend itself against the Native Americans we put in on reservations? I mean, is that a bad comparison or a good comparison?
First of all, what I would say is back then we didn't have a body of international law that had been developed through legal institutions and matured. So back then it was literally the frontier. It was the wild, wild west. Today, we're supposed to be civilized. We're supposed to have learned certain lessons from the Second World War about fascist Germany and the genocide they carried out, not just against the Jews, but against the Russians, against the Poles, against the Gypsies, against homosexuals, about Imperial Japan and the slaughter of the Chinese. We came together as a community under the vehicle of the United Nations to say that is not how civilized nations are to behave. And we spoke out against colonial powers, and we spoke about the right of self-determination. And we determined that when you are a people who are being illegally occupied, you have an inherent right to oppose the occupiers, and the occupiers have no right of self-defense, no inherent right, because the occupation is unjust. So I'm not giving the great American manifest destiny march to the sea a clean bill of health. I'm not doing that. Of course, we committed genocide of our own. We committed mass murder. The crimes we committed against the Native Americans, the indigenous peoples of North America, are manifest, and we should never forget those crimes. But I'm just saying that back then we were barbarians. Today we claim to be civilized, and yet we ignore the very foundation of civilization, which are these laws that say you can't do this, and there are consequences for doing this. Israel is behaving as a nation above the law, above the rule of law. They ignore it, and the United States is supporting this. So what does that say about us?
And Jose, are you as shocked as I am at the corporate news media, how that makes news because it was said once on a corporate news show? And I think Jeremy overestimates the quality, because he says, how can you sit here as a journalist? I don't think those people are actually journalists. They're no Edward R. Murrows. I mean, if you ask the modern reporter, have you no shame, they would just say that's a double negative. Anyway, what do you say to that?
Well, first of all, I would just say I think those people are not human, because I don't think a human being can actually know what's happening over there and sit right with it and go to sleep at night not even thinking about it. I don't think that anybody who is watching the images coming out of Gaza, finding out all the people who are dead right now, or looking at the videos of dead children who have actually been beheaded, and then just go on about their lives and say, well, that's something happening over there, or this is, or maybe the famous line I hear is, well, Hamas shouldn't have started it. This happened 78 years ago. But I want to address something that Scott had brought up. I thought that the American Revolution was fought so that we didn't have to be like the barbaric British Empire anymore. But today, the United States likes to imitate itself as if it's this British Empire clone. And I think that's absolutely horrible. We have 700 military bases around the world acting like we're the world's superpower. That is not what our country was founded for. That is not what our republic is supposed to do. We're supposed to spread peace around the world. We're supposed to be people who actually mediate the conflicts without weapons. And I don't think us supplying all these weapons and arms to Israel is doing the world any favor. Now, I think Scott disagrees with me when I say I think it's happening here in the United States. I think the United States is what's dictating Israel, and that the policy is being done here, not over there. And I think if the plug was pulled here by the collective administration, because I don't think we know who the hell is in power right now, certainly not Biden, most definitely isn't Kamala Harris, whoever the hell is pulling the strings in the back rooms, I think if they just pulled the plug on this, it could happen if the American people demanded it.
Well, isn't just to that point, Scott, didn't a recent revelation come out, a leak, that the United States had plans on how to attack Iran? Was that an American plan, or was that an Israeli plan?
Well, the intelligence documents that came out talk about Israeli military preparations, and apparently somebody leaked it in an effort to try and stop the Israeli attack. But let's be clear. Israel has telegraphed what it plans on doing, and the United States is in full support. Last September, or 2 Septembers ago, 2023, after the death of the Iranian girl got arrested because of the hijab, there was extreme violence that broke out in Iran. And this violence was more than just demonstrations. It took on a life of its own as various resistance groups or opposition groups jumped into the fray. And I spoke with then President Raisi that same month, And he said that this was a concerted effort by the United States, by Israel, by British intelligence, by other foreign intelligence to achieve regime change in Iran. You just had on September 30th, Benjamin Netanyahu give a speech where he told the Iranian people, hey, we killed Hassan Nasrallah, and now we're going to come in and we're going to kill your leadership. You soon will be free. You soon will have a chance to rise up and overthrow. I think the Israeli attack is going to be a decapitation attack, a strike against the Iranian leadership to replicate what Israel has done with Hezbollah, with Hamas. And I think the United States is 100% behind this.
Yeah. Okay. Let me just remind people that coming up this Saturday, I'm going to be I'm doing a show for the anti-war Jose Vega and Diane Sear. It's VegaSearPeaceFund.org. So it's this Saturday, 2 p.m. in New York City. When you buy the ticket, they'll send you an email let you know where that event is taking place. So Jose Vega, Diane Sear, there's going to be lots of music there, lots of speakers. I'll be there. Who else is going to be there, Jose?
Oh, well, of course, it's going to be Scott. Of course, Colonel Larry Wilkerson of the Eisenhower Media Group, Dennis Fritz, our friend Garland Nixon, and our other friends from Due Dissidents, Russell Dobular and Keaton Weiss, are going to be there as well. Ray McGovern will be joining us virtually. It'll be, I think that maybe everyone. I hope I'm not forgetting anybody. If I am, I'm sorry. We'll amend it in the program. It's going to be quite a great day because what you're hearing from Scott, you'll be hearing on that day. And I know he has an event happening the next day too, which we'll get to as well. And I just want to highlight the importance of both of these events and what we've got going on these next 2 days. See, this is the resistance. Right. We are censored online. We are doing things we can on social media. We reach people that we can. But the truth is that when we are in person, when we exercise our right to assemble, when we exercise our right to free speech, as what Julian Assange has asked all of us to do, that is what we are doing in these 2 days. That is what we are exercising and practicing. We are a resistance. And this is all happening almost kind of quasi underground. You know, you'll get the address, of course, once you purchase a ticket. But this is the only way in which people can assemble nowadays, which is in person and not fear being censored or shadow banned or restricted. That's why we are doing these events. And we're doing it, exactly almost like a week before the election, because we are trying to supersede the election. We want to be above it. We are trying to tell people you don't need to rely on an elected official or some candidate. Not that people shouldn't vote for me. People should vote for me, but people should vote to elect themselves to stand up and tell the truth and do something. And I'll let Scott talk about his event on Sunday.
So here is Scott's event. Was still on Saturday. It's the Vega Sear event, and then on Sunday it's Operation Dawn. It's a brunch. It's at Tudor City Steakhouse. It's Sunday, October 27, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. I'll be there. Scott Ritter will be there. Judge Napolitano, Randy Credico, Russell Dobular, Dennis Fritz, Danny Haifong, Garland Nixon, Jeff Norman, Diane Sear, Jose Vega, and Larry Wilkerson. So those are two power-packed shows on Saturday and Sunday. And go ahead, Scott. What else would you like to tell people about it?
No, I mean, this is, again, taking advantage of Jose and Diane's event on Saturday. We figured since people might be in New York City and spend the night, why not put together a brunch the next day? And why not see if we could take advantage of the talent to put together some panels? And so, we've put together 3 panels. Operation Dawn is a challenge that, I've put out to American voters, asking them the question, what would you do to save democracy, to save America, to save the world through your vote in November? And what we're going to do with these panels is we're going to talk about, the danger of nuclear war. What would you do to save the world? We're going to talk about the assault on free speech. What would you do to save America? And we're going to talk about, what it takes to save democracy in America. What would you do to save democracy? And with the eye on the election in November, I respect people's right to say I'm voting for this person and that person. What I've asked people to do, though, is hold on to your vote. Don't give it away yet. Make people earn it. By throwing light on these 3 issues, we're hoping that we're able to get candidates to recognize that there's a block of people out there that haven't committed yet, and you need to earn their vote by articulating sound policies about these three critical directions. So that's the goal. We have a fantastic venue, the Tudor City Steakhouse. If you go to scottritter.com, you can purchase tickets. You're going to get a world-class buffet. You're going to get an Operation Dawn challenge coin, and you're going to get three fantastic panels. We're going to videotape the panels, and we'll package them, and we'll get them out so we can magnify or echo the impact that we're going to have at this brunch. But this is an outstanding lineup. Jimmy, I thank you very much for agreeing to come, and I'm very much looking forward to this.
Okay, so we'll see everybody this weekend in New York City. Stick around. I have one more story I'd like to cover with you if you both have time.
Go for it.
All right, over to Steph.
Okay.
The show right now, Jose Vega and Scott Ritter is with me, and I want to just run this story past them. This is from Middle East Eye. Israeli soldiers becoming disillusioned and tired of fighting in Gaza. That's a report. Increasing numbers of Israeli soldiers are becoming disillusioned with fighting in Gaza and other areas of conflict in Lebanon and the West Bank, leading to some to refuse to return to the battlefield. According to a report in Israeli outlet Hamokim, interviews with over 20 parents and fighters in a range of battalions have revealed increasing dissatisfaction amongst the ranks. Among the Nahal Brigade, soldiers spend 5 weeks fighting in Gaza before returning home to rest, something they have done 11 times so far since the beginning of fighting October 2023. However, according to Hamokim, I hope I'm saying that even close, during the 11th deployment, only 6 soldiers of a platoon of 30 showed up, with the others coming up with excuses. I call it refusal and rebellion, said Inbal, mother of one of the soldiers in the platoon. They keep going back to the same buildings they've already cleared, only to find them booby-trapped again. In the Zaytun neighborhood alone in Gaza City, they've been there 3 times. They understand that it is futile and it's pointless. All the interviewees in the report spoke anonymously over fears they would face harassment from the military. What kills them is the conditions and the duration of the fighting with no end in sight. You never know when you will get out, and it's been like this for a year, another parent said. The Israeli military has published the names of over 750 troops killed since the war began in October last year, including more than 350 who were killed during ground operations in Gaza. At least 43 Israeli troops have been killed in attacks and ground operations on the northern front of the war, along with the Lebanese border. Another soldier told Hamokim that missions were being done halfway as a result of lack of manpower. The platoons are empty. Those who aren't dead are physically wounded or mentally broken. Very few come back to fight, and even they aren't fully okay. Wow. This is from the New Arab, not The Onion. CNN highlights suffering of Israeli army bulldozer driver who ran over so many people in Gaza, it made him turn vegetarian. That is not from the... So, of course, CNN is sympathetic to the guy who drove the bulldozer. He got out of Gaza, but Gaza did not get out of him. Israeli soldiers returning from war struggle with trauma and suicide. This is from CNN. Guy Zakin provided insight into their experience in Gaza. We saw very, very, very difficult things, he told CNN, things that are difficult to accept. The former soldier had spoken publicly about the psychological trauma endured by Israeli troops in Gaza. Boy, imagine the trauma that Palestinians had to go through. In a testimony to the Knesset, Israeli's parliament in June, Zakin said that on many occasions, soldiers had to run over terrorists, dead and alive, in the hundreds. Everything squirts out, he added. Zakin says he can no longer eat meat, as it reminds him of the gruesome scenes he witnessed from his bulldozer in Gaza, and struggles to sleep at night, the sound of explosions ringing in his head. When you see a lot of meat outside and blood, both ours and theirs, Hamas, then it really affects you when you eat, he told CNN, referring to the bodies as meat. I'm not sure this piece is about the IDF soldiers who had to go vegetarian because of how many people they bulldoze is really achieving the goal CNN had for the article. Yeah, I don't think so. I think CNN wanted it to make people sympathetic towards the IDF soldiers. Why? By the way, just to let you know, why is Ukraine's army facing desertion crisis? I've got 3 guesses for you. So let me bring in Scott Ritter and Jose. Scott, could you have predicted this?
Well, you can. I did predict it. I called out the Israeli army from the very beginning as being an army that is not professional in the sense that the American military is professional. I'm not defending any war crimes carried out by American soldiers. I know that we have misbehaved abroad as well. I'm talking about training and preparation for war. I can say that the United States Marine Corps, when we train a Marine, that Marine is ready to close with and destroy the enemy through firepower maneuver 24/7. He lives, eats, breathes war. He prays for war. He wants war. And once war starts, he wants to stay in war until he's either killed or broken. Marines do break. But the point is, we know what we're getting into when we sign up. The Israelis, they're a conscript military. They, it's obligatory service. And the Israelis have made war easy because they don't really fight hardened enemies anymore. They bomb children, they bomb women, they go in with technological supremacy, they fight short wars. They're not used to taking casualties. They're not emotionally prepared for the reality of war. And I said they're going to go into Gaza, and it's one of the first articles I wrote. They're going to turn Gaza into the equivalent of Stalingrad above the ground and Iwo Jima below the ground, meaning the Japanese tunnels. And they're not prepared for either. And as a result, they're going to get worn down. They're going to get worn out. And eventually they will lose because of a death by 1,000 cuts and exhaustion. That's what we're seeing right now. The Israeli military is not organized or indoctrinated for this kind of long war. An Israeli general himself said if this war continues on to the summer, the Israeli army will cease to exist because people will just stop fighting because they don't believe in this. I mean, the genocide that they're doing will break. Could you imagine somebody coming back at the end of World War II, a German, and he said, I was in the Einsatzgruppen, and I had to shoot Jews. I had to shoot a lot of Jews. It got really ugly there. They were lined up in the ditch, and I had to shoot them, and the blood came out, and the brains came out. Sometimes the children ran away, and I had to bayonet them, and I can't sleep at night because of this. Would you have any sympathy for this murderous dog? No, of course not. There should be no sympathy for the Israelis. The Israelis are committing a war of aggression against the sovereign people, the Palestinians, whom they've denied any opportunity to have a homeland. Israel has no right of self-defense, and the Israeli army has no justification in carrying out the crimes that they're doing. And the same can be said of the Ukrainian military. They're losing confidence in why they're fighting. They're now waking up to the reality that this war could have stopped back in April of 2022. And had it stopped in April 2022, they'd have Kherson, Zaporizhia. They'd have 700,000 men alive. They've had an economy that's intact. Instead, they're recognizing the fact that the West has goaded them into this conflict where their only future is death and destruction. That's it. They're not going to beat the Russians. The Russians are going to continue to kill them. And many of the Ukrainian soldiers are recognizing this and making the determination to run as opposed to stay, fight, and die.
Do you think that is happening in Ukraine? I mean, I guess you just said so. So you think that I can't believe that it's taken this long. I can't believe they couldn't realize this immediately. And I mean, if I can realize it here, I'm sure they could anyway. But there
is something to be said about fighting. Look, I understand the Russian position, and I'm actually somewhat sympathetic to the Russian position, but I recognize that the territory that they're fighting on is Ukrainian territory. Even the territory that Russia has taken, and Russia says is ours, Ukrainians are saying, but it was ours first. It was ours before you intervened militarily. So I can understand Ukrainians saying, I'm willing to fight and die for my homeland. I'm willing to fight and die for this territory. But at some point in time, when you realize that this is futile, that you're not going to be able to recapture this territory, that all that's going to happen. There was a brigade commander in the Ukrainian military, very well-regarded brigade commander. His brigade was a tough brigade. It fought very well. And he said, they keep telling us that we have to restore the 1991 borders, meaning drive the Russians back out. He said, but the fact is, we're going to restore the 1991 borders, but not the ones that they're thinking of, meaning that the Russians are going to drive them all the way to the Ukraine, absorbing all of Ukraine. That's the reality the Ukrainians are coming up with, that if they continue this futile exercise, many of them are going to die, and those that don't die are going to lose their country.
Jose,
can I add something?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Well, you guys know Rafat Al-Arir. He was the one who was killed by a Israeli drone strike, I believe. This was earlier in 2024 or so. And Max Blumenthal, in the book Goliath, I think, or it's in 51 Days War, describes this very thing about, well, who would have sympathy for the Israeli army? As Scott said, it's a conscript army. So you have kids who are born in Israel who are brainwashed pretty much from the day they're born that they are supposed to be the superior chosen people. And then they go into the military when they're 18 years old, and then they're shown all kinds of advanced brainwashing techniques to make them kill. But Rafat Al-Arir, when he was teaching at the Islamic University of Gaza, had his Palestinian students, and this was a university that was funded by Hamas, by the way, in 2007, I believe. He had his students write essays from the perspective of Israeli soldiers who would shoot up kindergartens and mass slaughter children. And he would force his students to say, now, I want you to write about that Israeli soldier when he has to go home and talk to his family. And I want you to imagine what kind of nightmares and PTSD he must be suffering. That was Rafat doing that with the kids that his students that he was teaching poetry to. But not only that, he was teaching them Shakespeare's The Merchant of Venice. And this Palestinian poet, was doing his best to say the Israelis have no humanity for us, therefore we have to have humanity for them. This was even after their university was destroyed and bombed, and a lot of original Palestinian poetry was burned up in that university. He still asked his students to try and have some humanity. I think what we are seeing here is a classic case of old men have strife and conflict and jealousy and feuds that go back generations, and young men die because of it. The point is that this is all stupid. It is all absurd. And that's my take on this. I think that it should all end. I don't think a 16, 17, 18-year-old should be sent off to war for something that happened generations ago, to go and mass slaughter people that he will never understand. So that's my take on it.
I'll just put a spin on that, if you don't mind, Jose.
You can, please, Scott. This is America, baby. You can do whatever you want.
I understand where you're coming from, and it's the most noblest of points of view. It's one that is rooted in humanity, and it's something that we want every human being to have. I'm a big fan of the book To Kill a Mockingbird, and Atticus Finch is one of my heroes. I adore the literary figure, and I love the way that Gregory Peck played him in the movie. And this great symbol of humanity. A rabid dog entered his community, and Atticus Finch took up a rifle and shot the dog. I love dogs. I have 4 of my own. I'm sort of famous for them barking in the middle of interviews. And I defend them. They're part of my family. I would never want any harm done to any dogs. I believe in humane societies and adoption, etc. But when a rabid dog enters my community and threatens my community, threatens my dogs, threatens my neighbors, that rabid dog must be killed instantly. There are rabid dogs in this world. And right now we have a whole bunch of rabid dogs that call themselves Israelis. And they are inflicting harm on people. And there comes a time when you have to stop saying, oh, I'm going to be humane and I'm going to be, and the Marine in me comes out. Close with and destroy the enemy through firepower maneuver. And this means kill, and kill. That's the reality out right now. The only language the Israelis understand is the language of death. And until Hamas inflicts enough death on them that the Israelis change the way they are operating. Because leaving the Israelis to their own volition, we now have death marches out of northern Gaza. Death marches out of northern Gaza. How do you stop a death march? By hugging the Israelis? No, by killing the Israelis. And that's why, again, I come back to where we started. Do I support Hamas? Hell yes, I support Hamas. Will I condemn Hamas? Hell no. Hamas is fighting for the freedom of the Palestinian people that's being denied to them by a brutal Israeli occupation. And until we call a spade, we open the door for the Israelis taking advantage of our humanity, saying, oh, we'll accept a ceasefire. Israel right now has said there will never be a Palestinian state. The Israeli security minister is talking about the depopulation of Gaza and putting Israelis in there. They treat the Palestinians, not just treat them, but they call them human animals. They are subhumans, meant to die. There is no sympathy for them. How can we treat people who call everybody who isn't part of the master race, part of the chosen people, human animals, subhumans? Treat them as humans? I mean, I get where you're coming from. I get where you're coming from. And I wish I didn't have this part in me, because this is an ugly reality of who I am. But rabid dogs need to die. And there's a whole bunch of rabid dogs in the Middle East right now, and they're called Israelis.
Well, those are two stark, different takes on the. I reminded of the quote of when I don't know who said it. It was Nietzsche or Jung. Someone said, "When fighting monsters, be careful not to become a monster yourself."
Yep.
And so, I think it's if you can hold on to your humanity and see the humanity in others. And Carl Jung talks about your shadow projection. That's what war is. War is when you have the worst parts of yourself projected onto your enemy. And if you can make that part of yourself conscious, you can then not condemn your enemy, but you could see them as yourself, which is what Jesus's message was. So it's definitely different points of view, but war is horrible. And if we could stop the war, Jose and Diane Sarah are going to do it this Saturday in New York, October 26th, 2 p.m. I'll be there. Tell everybody else who's going to be there, Jose.
Yeah. So it's going to be myself and Scott. So, you're welcome to come, and maybe we'll elaborate on this further. I don't know. I think these things should be fought out. They should be discussed on a stage in a public forum, because that's exactly what kind of discussions we need to be having. And that's exactly what you'll find at this thing on Saturday. Why is it that we have to resort to platforms like yours, Jimmy, where we can have these kind of really, stark discussions? And I think so. Anyway, it'll be myself, Diane Sarah, yourself, Jimmy, Scott Ritter, Colonel Larry Wilkerson, Dennis Fritz, Ray McGovern joining virtually. It'll be our friends from Due Dissidents, Keaton Weiss, Russell Dabular. I'm sure there's somebody I'm forgetting or people I'm forgetting, but I think that's a lot of the people there. Tickets are at vegasarahpeacefund.org. And again, I just want to reemphasize, this is being a part of the resistance. That's how movements are started, by exercising our right to assembly and our right to free speech. Because if we can't get together anymore and decide this is the point where we decide we're going to be sick of all of it and we're going to move and organize together, then we have nothing. So we have to meet this Saturday. You have to come if you want to be a part of a movement that's not just a protest movement, but one that intends to win. So that's my take, and why you should come.
And the tickets it's a donation. It's actually not a ticket sale. It's a donation.
Thank you for clarifying that. That's right. Yes, because we are campaigns and these are campaign events, you are technically making a donation to both my campaign and Diane's campaign. It'll be split evenly unless otherwise indicated. And that's how you get admittance. There's a number there. If you have questions and need something answered, you can call that number and we'll help you out.
So, and then the next day on Sunday, Scott's hosting a series of panels at the Tudor City Steakhouse. I'll be on that. Judge Napolitano will be there. Randy Credico will be there in case you need a Coke hookup. Russell Dabular, Dennis Fritz, Danny Haifong, Garland Nixon, Jeff Norman, Diane Sarah, Jose Vega, and Larry Wilkerson. That's quite the lineup. So everybody go to scottritter.com for the Sunday event. That's a brunch from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. And go to vegasarahpeacefund.org for tickets to the Saturday event. Anything you'd like to say, Scott, before we say goodbye?
Look, again, I just want to point out that what Jose and you have said, is morally correct. And it's what we need to be striving for. But I just want to point out the reality of war. He who hesitates in combat dies. And we can speak very well of the people that we bury, saying he was a good soul, he was a kind man. He thought about extending the humane arm at the wrong moment because the enemy who wasn't extending the humane arm killed him. It's essential that we understand that we have men and women in the military who are trained to kill. It's also essential that we, the people of the United States of America, never give them the opportunity to kill. That we insist that our elected officials exhaust every possibility short of war before ordering these brave men and women off to war. The ideal military career would be somebody spending 20 years training for war and never getting the opportunity to do it because we had wise leadership. And that's what these panels are about, how to empower the American people to elect people who make the right decisions. So we don't have to have this discussion about sending Scott Ritters out to fight and die for our country and asking them to do horrible things and come home and pay horrible prices. That we actually have people that believe in peace, believe in humanity, believe in the rule of law, and implement policies that lead to peaceful coexistence and not the violence that we seem to be incurring and encouraging today by our government. So I know I came off as a little hot-headed and red-blooded, but that's my background. But I just want to make sure people understand that I'm not the animal that I sometimes appeared to be.
It's scary to contradict you sometimes, eh?
Okay, Jose and Scott, I really appreciate you making time. Thanks for your commentary. Thanks for your peace activism and your work in ending the wars. And I'll see you both this weekend.
Looking forward to it.
Okay, over to Steph.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. You want to go to a card? Okay, we got to go to a card. We're going to